This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, we want to welcome you to the first episode of Real Talk post-August long weekend. I'm sure that some of you have just arrived back home. Some of you are still on the road. Some of you are recharged, ready to go, and some of you are absolutely exhausted. All of these, of course, ideal circumstances as we do whatever we can to squeeze the last remaining bits out of this beautiful summer. Thank you for joining us today. In just a second, we're going to get to Charles Adler, his take on the top stories making news across the country, including the Prime Minister of Canada taking his son to the Barbie movie. That's right, it's triggered thousands of his loudest critics, John. Thousands of Trudeau critics can't believe that it wasn't a pair. I think they can't wrap their minds around Justin Trudeau and his son Xavier proudly on Team Barbie, rocking the pink T-shirts, the pink hoodies.
The humanity.
The billion-dollar grossing movie. That movie is unbelievable.
Breaking records, yeah.
Greta Gerwig continuing to solidify herself as one of the great all-time box office earners with that movie. But it was kind of like half hilarious and half totally discouraging to read the comments to the Prime Minister's post after attending the Barbie movie. I think it's safe to say the majority of them, at least the loudest critical ones, about as homophobic as they get. But I want to get to Charles Adler's take on that. And then the UCP government here in Alberta declaring a 6-month moratorium on green energy projects. So there will be no new wind and solar projects given the green light in the province of Alberta for the next 6 months. They say they're responding to concerns from rural landowners on a whole bunch of fronts. Seemed to us to be a perfect opportunity to get into this from a number of different angles. So today we're going to talk to Binnu Jeyakumar, the director of the Pembina Institute's electricity program. We'll get her take on this story. Tomorrow on Wednesday's Real Talk, we're going to talk to the United Conservative Party's Environment Minister, the Honorable Rebecca Schultz will join us on the show. And then we'll get the NDP's critic, Najwan El-Junaid out of Calgary, who will join us on Thursday's show. So you're going to get... Can you have three different sides of a coin? I guess not. We're gonna have to find a different way to frame it. But three different angles on this. We'll get one from an expert in industry. We'll get one from the minister, obviously a government spokesperson to say it, to put it that way. Minister Schultz joining us on the show. It'll be her first interview on Real Talk since she was seeking the leadership of the UCP. So it's been a while. It'll be good to connect with her again. And then Najwan will be making her Real Talk debut. Remember, she was one of those that knocked off an incumbent down in Calgary in a hotly contested race. And so we'll have lots to talk about this week. We'll get to what else is coming up. Many of you had a lot to say about some of our conversations last week. I've got emails in front of me. I do have one from Shalaine on the Barbie movie. We've got an email from Deanna on smoking. I want to get to smoking and vaping, Johnny. And then Travis wrote us an essay on the Canadian Football League, in particular our roundtables, our panels comments on the Edmonton Elks on Friday. And it didn't sit well with Trav, who wrote us a great email. And so we're going to make sure that we make some time for those. We love when you interact with the show. As I just told you, if you subscribe to our weekly email, you know you've got that fresh in your inbox this morning. Adler coming up in 30 seconds. But first, we want to recognize this episode presented by our friends at We Know Training. And, you know, anytime you're talking politics these days, or political policy in particular, there's one subject that's going to come up again and again and again, and that is the cost of living. I probably don't have to tell you that it's gone crazy over the last while, but it's no surprise to learn that that's not limited to just households. The cost of doing business has gone up as well. If you need to boost your business's revenue, one of the absolute best things that you can do is to create a standout training program. We Know Training is your best training partner for creating courses and programs that sell. They've helped associations, regulators, nonprofits, and more generate millions of dollars in revenue without any extra work for their teams in creating, managing, and selling those training courses. You want to learn more? Visit weknowtraining.ca and see what they could do for your business today. Well, on the heels of long weekends, we get to chat with Charles Adler on Tuesdays. This is one of those days as we check in with the Titan of Talk, the Emmy Award-winning talk show host, and of course, the host of The Charles Adler Show, his new podcast project. My friend, welcome back. It's nice to see your face again.
It's nice to see you, Ryan, and it's nice not to be Rebecca Schultz.
Why is that?
Because I don't want to be the person representing a government that is forced to be asked by Ryan Jesperson, so what is it about 2023 that's complicated? I don't want to be the person to have to deal with that.
This is for people that aren't familiar with this story, this is Alberta's announced a pause on renewable energy projects, citing rural concerns. They say that they've been hearing from constituents in rural Alberta about development on agricultural land, about the effect on scenery, reclamation security, and system reliability. It sounds to me like you don't buy it.
Well, when you've got how many thousands of gallons of orphan wells need to be cleaned, and you're, making this a landscaping issue. I guess it is a lot of old contaminated crude. Is that easier on the eyes than windmills? Once again, we're in 2023. Alberta wants to be the energy capital of North America. How do you do that when you're saying no to green energy? I mean, this is like saying no to the wheel in the 16th century. I don't see the point.
Yeah, I mean, industry voices. We'll hear from a spokesperson from Pembina Institute in just a second. And obviously, I'm sure that as we take this on this week, as we tackle this week, we're going to hear from more because there's probably a million angles to this. One of the very valid angles to this is that Alberta's been a leader when it comes to renewables. As a matter of fact, development in Canada in particular, just last year, 17% of Alberta's power came from wind and solar, which exceeds the province's 15% goal. And there's currently another 15 renewable energy projects before the Alberta Utilities Commission. These are all going to be placed on hold. One of the common responses to this story that I've seen, one of the recurring responses, and it's no surprise, is people wondering aloud, since when did a conservative government stand in the way of economic development? And I think that that's a pretty fair question.
I honestly think that in the last campaign, many small C conservatives like me sort of held our noses and voted for Danielle Smith because the premise was, well, she's not going to be bad for business. The conservative government is not going to turn down business. So it seems to me that right now they're turning down billions of dollars of private capital chasing today's energy called green energy. At some point, there's an evolution from fossil energy to green energy. Alberta has the golden opportunity to have a fist on each. Why not have a fistful of dollars as opposed to a fistful of weird questions? And the weirdest question that anybody can be asked in the energy business in 2023 is, what the hell don't you understand about modern? What the hell don't you understand about today and tomorrow and the future? If the future is a problem for you, you've got a problem.
I'm kind of putting the call out. I mean, you're essentially putting the call out with your comments here, and I know that we're going to hear from people. Talk at ryanjesperson.com is how you can email us, and Chuck, I'm sure you and I will hear from a bunch on Twitter. In particular, I'd like to hear from members of our rural audience. This is where the government says the concern's coming from, and there's an advocacy group, Chuck, you might call them a lobby group, Rural Municipalities of Alberta. People know RMA. Paul McLaughlin says that their members have too many abandoned wells, exactly what you're talking about. They say too many abandoned wells. This is the Calgary Herald's reporting, and other oil and gas infrastructure on their land. So they say essentially they don't want to get burned twice. Right? He says that, this isn't a compliment to oil and gas. He says we've learned a lot from the oil and gas industry, and I'd sure hate to see the same thing happen to solar operators. They say that while farmers and municipalities are getting tax and rent revenues from renewable energy, there's also concerns that agriculture will be displaced. That is a valid concern. How valid it is relating to green energy remains to be seen, and that's what we'll hash out on the show this week. But I wouldn't go ahead and immediately dismiss that Do you know what I'm saying? We probably don't pay enough attention to how ag is being displaced, and it's not certainly just green energy. Look at how we grow our cities out, right? Look at all the topsoil that we lose. You talk to any farmer, they'll talk your ear off for an hour on how we're making, in some cases, what they would describe as irreparable mistakes.
So are the cows complaining about solar panels? Are there solar panels being put in the dairy barns? I mean, get serious. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't like it when people in rural Canada, whether it's rural Alberta or rural Manitoba, are portrayed as hicks. These are agribusiness people. These people understand business. They understand private capital. They understand the importance of the energy business, all of it, green, brown, all of it. They understand the importance of it to the province of Alberta. And the idea that we're not going to move into the future as quickly as possible because we've got to appeal to the so-called political base in rural Alberta. I mean, I'm sorry. If the NDP had said during the campaign that the Conservatives would do this, the Conservatives would have denied it. I'll ask you the question. I'll just be a nice guy here and ask you the question. If the NDP had said, if Rachel Notley had said during the campaign that the Conservatives would stand in the way of private capital chasing green energy projects in Alberta, if Notley had made that accusation about Smith, what would Smith have said, Ryan?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there'd be huge criticism around standing. Like, this is what I bring it back to, and this is where I think one of the conversations needs to focus on, which is what does this do to economic momentum? What message does this send to other jurisdictions, not just other Canadian provinces, but what message does this send internationally? Like, you and I have long talked about, I don't want to get too deep into a rabbit hole, but one of the things that's really fascinated me is how Calgary has introduced new slogans every few years, right? Calgary is constantly, putting up new billboards on the way into Calgary, welcoming you to Calgary, and it's like Heart of the New West or Feel the Energy. And I think that there has been a concerted effort. You even look at how TransCanada, look at way back in the day, and it's a long story, but TransCanada Pipelines, TCBL, what is it now? TC Energy, right? The word energy, there's huge potential there, which would imply that, those that are, sitting around the big boardroom tables, those that are making multi-billion-dollar decisions recognize that there's huge potential here with renewables. Although some of the big traditional oil and gas players have divested themselves of renewable assets in the past little while. I'm curious to know what this does to Alberta's economic reputation. I mean, what's the true cost of an announcement like this?
There's not a single province in Canada, no matter what some of them say publicly, there's not a single province in Canada that doesn't have Alberta envy. Everybody would want to have Alberta's resources, and everybody would want to have Alberta's attractiveness toward new Canadians and to Canadians who are living in different parts of Canada who want to come to Alberta. It is their promised land. And everyone sees Alberta as the province of the future, regardless of some things that Smith may have said in the campaign or during her talk show career or lobbying career. Regardless of all that political crap, most people in this country see Alberta as a province of the future. And so this one is a bizarre story. There's no money in it. This is not about Conservatives being for free enterprise. This is about Conservatives worrying about a relatively small number of people in their province who have been stoked on fear. It's total fear mongering to say that if Alberta becomes a province of lots of solar panels and money involved in the solar panel industry, the solar industry, and the wind industry, it's fear mongering to say that will be the death of the Alberta economy. To me, it is one of the most important igniters of the economy, because you talk about symbolism in Calgary, symbolism of today and the future, and opening the door to the new West, the new Canada, the new world, and all the rest of it. These are the icons that Alberta at the moment is trashing, and trashing the icons of the future and the future of energy. Once again, I don't have to be a Wall Streeter to say it makes no sense.
I want to drop into our live chat here. Alberta Girl says our farmland should never be used for green energy until every single roof is covered in solar panels. I mean, you see the big solar farms. I mean, they are what they are. Anna says solar panels, says I'm not against renewable energy, have a short life cycle, and they're a mess to clean up, and they're often abandoned. The panels are waste products. I mean, there's some criticism around it for sure. Kirk says solar needs to be on the reclaimed land at the Genesee Power Plant. It's an easy connection to an existing power grid. That's an interesting one. Bunny Slippers says, oh, come on, there were cows among the turbines when I drove down south. The cows didn't seem to care about the view. Chuck, it really is something. Just this weekend, I drove down around Crow's Nest Pass, southern part of the province. Absolutely magnificent. That cowboy trail, they call it, Highway 22, is just stunning. But the closer that you get to Lethbridge in that part of the country, part of the province, the wind turbine presence is unmistakable because there's obviously huge opportunity there, right? Anybody that's visited Lethbridge knows that thing blows.
It's windy.
No offense, Lethbridge.
There's no city in this country more windy than Lethbridge. If
It's
you got
true.
like equilibrium issues, you got to stay out of there. Otherwise, it's a wonderful place with wonderful people. And of course, I'm always beholden to all of the people who listened to my various shows in Alberta out of Lethbridge. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you
you're
said
not.
Lethbridge, and I'm thinking wind.
I'm just saying there's a ton of opportunity down there,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are capitalizing on that opportunity. I mean, it changes the landscape, and so do a lot of things. It seems to me, to be honest, to be a little bit not just hypocritical, but almost facetious. People that would argue that, well, I'm concerned about wind in particular or solar panels because of the adjustment to the landscape, to the view of the landscape. That's something that, I mean, we've had no problem with, obviously, drilling rigs forever, with development forever. I don't quite understand that. That seems to me to be a bit of a red herring in the conversation. If I'm missing a point, again, if an audience member is screaming at the screen right now or screaming at their AirPods, you can send me a note if I'm missing the point here. MA says the land around wind turbines is being grazed. I'm more choked about endless irrigation when we have water shortages. There's another point. There's another one. Kirk says wasting prime farmland for food production does need to be looked at. So, I mean, these are concerns that people want to have these conversations around. And that's why we're having the conversations on it this week. A 6-month moratorium is, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but you don't see government step up and simply say we are halting industry. We're stopping industry in its steps for half a year.
We're sticking a thumb in the dike.
Yeah.
And we don't want people worshiping the sun or pandering to the wind.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. All of this is hillbilly nonsense. And once again, I just want to emphasize, because I have gotten so much contacts over the years from people in rural Alberta, there's nothing that makes them sicker than being portrayed as 18th century farmers with the straw hats, with no machinery, sort of pulling the mule. These are modern business people of agriculture, and they understand the future, and they want their province to be part of the future. I get that a sliver of them. There are some of them who are into this, right-wing political crap, but most of them just want to feed their families.
This is interesting. Chad says, did you notice that Disney, and I didn't, put solar panels over their parking lot in Paris? Says that it's the largest solar array in the European Union. That's interesting. Johnny and I were talking about this a while ago, too. I mean, in the comment earlier in the show from somebody that said, solar farms shouldn't be anywhere near agricultural land until every rooftop has them. I'm blown away that more businesses don't have solar on the roof. And I think that there's a huge opportunity on two fronts. When you take a look at what some big cities, including New York City, have done on rooftops, Chuck, number one is solar panels everywhere possible. And number two is putting grass up there. A lot of people are creating more greenery on top of their buildings, on the building fronts. And it's an interesting and really neat solution to some of the challenges that we face. I wouldn't be surprised. You look at new housing developments, a lot of builders, like Jamin down in Calgary is an example. Chuck, almost every one of their new builds, every single one of them, the houses come with solar panels on the roof. Like Jamin is a builder here. They want to do they want every home to be net zero within the next couple of years.
I probably don't have the legal right to speak for Relay, the owner of this show. Okay.
Yeah.
Ryan Jesperson's company, his family business.
You got it.
I don't have the right to speak for them. I feel like family, but I don't have the legal right to speak for them. I'm gonna make a prediction.
How about you say it, and then we'll let you know after if you're able to speak on our behalf.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Someday, this show, the incredible Ryan Jesperson podcast, okay, someday this podcast will be powered by solar.
Ooh. Well,
Green energy will come to this program.
Yeah. I mean, in a
This
way,
program
we
will be
are.
produced because of green energy.
Yeah, that's
predict.
right. That's right. I
I
like
know
your
that
prediction.
maybe some predictions are a little too bold, but I'm gonna stand on that one, Ryan.
Yeah, I like where you're going with this. And our good friends at Kuby Renewable Energy, Chuck, will agree with you. And we'll talk a little bit more about them when we present positive reflections as we wrap up this episode. But, I mean, you look at how their business is booming, the fact that they haven't stopped hiring people for 3 straight years, and I think it goes to show that there's a lot of momentum, a lot of progress on this front. I mean, a lot of folks here are making great comments here from different perspectives. Greg says that land, irrigated land in the sunniest land is creating the most productive soil. Another says the moratorium on this green energy is long overdue. But the United Conservatives are being hypocritical because there's a real mess from oil and gas that needs to be addressed. Michael, with a zinger this morning, says there certainly was a lot of wind coming out of the Premier's office regarding renewables. There you go, Michael. That's 2 points for you. This is, I don't know. I don't know that this is one of those definitive. I'm going to approach every single one of these 3 interviews. We got one with Pembina coming up here in 5 minutes. We'll have one with the minister tomorrow, and we'll have one with the NDP's critic on energy on Thursday. And I'm going to approach all 3 interviews with an open mind, and we'll see who can convince me that this is either an excellent move, a prudent move, or a boneheaded move. And we'll try to find a definitive answer on that by the end of the week, but maybe it'll be one of those time will tell type circumstances.
We need to find a company called Open Minded, because that's what the Ryan Jesperson Show represents. Nobody is more open-minded than my brother Ryan.
Hey, I appreciate
Brought to you
that,
by
pal.
Open. Every comment we say on this show is chasing private capital.
Yeah.
That's the way to be for free enterprise in Alberta.
There you go.
Chase private capital. Don't stop it. Chase it.
Yeah, constantly. The show is, what can we say, a living, breathing animal. It's got to be
People
fed.
hunt for ducks and I hunt for money.
It's got to be
Got a problem with that? Not in Alberta. I hope not.
Hey, what was Justin Trudeau hunting for? Clicks,
Oh my
likes,
God.
and comments over the weekend when he and his son Xavier attended the Barbie movie. He posts a photo of them, says, "We're Team Barbie," and the internet exploded. His tweet, as of us speaking right this minute, Charles, has 40.5 million views, and it's got the comments. They're not exactly great, a lot of them. But what do you make of this? You think he's trying to poke the bear on purpose?
Let me do a little bit of WWJD here. What would Jesus do? Would Jesus respond to Justin Trudeau's tweet with all this homophobic stuff? I don't think so. But I sometimes wonder, and just as I have no right to speak for Ryan Jesperson Company, I have no right to speak for Christians or Christianity. However, I have to say this based on my relationship with Christians over my entire life, not just my professional life, my entire life. Okay, I don't understand how you can be on Twitter and post that you're a devout Christian and you love your family, and then spew and spew and spew all this homophobic stuff about Justin. I mean, aren't you thinking about your children and your grandchildren? What if they see Daddy being phobic? Does that not bother you? I mean, what part of the Sermon on the Mount is about hating on anybody? So if you could help me with that, Ryan, because you've got a much more Christian pedigree than I do. I mean, if you're a proud Christian man in Alberta, and you're posting all this hate about Trudeau and his pink shirt and Barbie and blah 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 blah, don't you think about your kids when you're tweeting?
Don't you think about your kids when you're tweeting should be on a T-shirt? And that's maybe a T-shirt that we should, in the spirit of your recent comments, maybe sell on our website. Gosh, can you tell that I'm holding myself back from taking huge swipes at a community in general? But I don't think that this is the first time. If we look back to, 2016, Trump getting elected, COVID, everything that's happened since, I think that people's understanding of what Christianity is and how it is to be lived has been bastardized and disgraced. And I think that there's a real twisted understanding of what Christianity is all about right now. And so, I mean, it starts with like the really subtle, like kind of entry level, shallow end of the pool, homophobia, people that refer to him as like Justine instead of Justin. And then it just gets like gnarlier and nastier and dirtier and more deplorable from there. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, we'll get emails, I guarantee today, from people that are Bible believing, Christ following Christians that'll write in and say, don't loop us all into this. We understand that God is love.
But if I'm a proud Christian father, the last thing I want in my life is for my Christian son or daughter to say, Daddy, why do you hate Justin Trudeau, and why are you calling him the F word and all those other words?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you hate gay people? I mean, do I want to confront that kind of question? Maybe some do want to confront that kind of question, but it doesn't feel like the Christian thing to do.
Yeah. Do you think that Trudeau like did it on purpose? Like, do you think there's been some like interesting kind of social media moments from him recently when he reached out to Taylor Swift, and was sort of like pleading with her on social media in good fun to bring her tour to Canada. She famously did not even respond to the tweet, which gave Trudeau's critics some fuel for their fire. And then this one, and I just wonder, like, is it as simple as a dad going to a movie with his son and saying we're Team Barbie? Or is it more? Is it Trudeau kind of like giving the middle finger to his critics and maybe distracting some of the conversation away from his separation from Sophie? I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't be unusual for a politician to be trolling people who, if they do come out and do the kinds of things they do, help him with their base. We always talk about the conservative base. I mean, liberals have a base too. And the liberal base doesn't like those people who call Trudeau names and engage in homophobia. I mean, so is he speaking to them? Probably. Is he speaking to what Justin Trudeau has always had? The cool factor. He's interested in pop culture. He's engaged with pop culture. So whether it's Taylor Swift or Barbie, Justin Trudeau is there. Pride parades, Justin Trudeau is there. I mean, Justin Trudeau, beyond being a father, is a politician, and for a politician to guard his own base closely and to say in so many different ways that I support you, I mean that's part of what he does. It's part of what he does very effectively, actually. I mean, and by the way, what is if we just look at this in very visceral pop culture terms, what's the downside of being Team Barbie?
I mean, if you're secure in yourself, there's zero downside. If you're completely insecure, and desperately concerned about what your equally insecure friends might think about you, then there's a whole bunch of downside, right? It's
if you're out there doing makeovers, if you're lose the glasses, put less product in the hair, change the clothes. I mean, if that's who you are, I guess you don't do the Team Barbie thing, but. You can accuse Trudeau of a lot of things. You can't call him insecure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons he makes insecure men so insecure is because he's so secure.
Yeah.
It's kind of like people who thrive on envy of the wealthy. They see a guy driving up in a Lamborghini and they want to blow themselves up.
Yeah. Yeah. Piers Morgan, the international talk show host, obviously, has stated that he's so glad he's not Canadian after Trudeau shared the photo of attending the Barbie movie with his son, says Piers Morgan, mocking the Canadian Prime Minister. And there was some pretty hilarious blowback to Piers Morgan. A lot of people saying, well, we're not sure that you were ever invited to be Canadian, Piers.
Well, I mean, first of all, nobody honestly thinks that Piers Morgan has spent a single quiet moment of his life wondering about whether or not he should seek Canadian citizenship. So on the one hand, it's kind of silly, but it has brought many Canadians together. Many Canadians are left, right, middle, whatever. They're all into this. We're glad you're not Canadian. We're proud that you're not Canadian. Whatever. Different people have different ways of saying it, but Piers Morgan, is trolling the world every day. He's a click whore, and he's very successful at it. And he was very successful at click whoring in the last 48 hours. Congratulations, Piers. I'm proud you're not Canadian, but I got to congratulate you for staying true to your brand.
Yeah, I wake up every day and say, thank God I'm not Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
So
there you go. I mean, minus the money. I would take the money. I thought Charlie Angus was pretty funny on this one. The NDP MP says, well, I was proven wrong. I never thought I would agree with this toxic windbag on a single issue. But here I stand with Piers. Stay the hell out of Canada, mate. That from Charlie Angus. You can find Charles Adler, of course, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Charles Adler. Make sure, hey, well, it's true. I mean, that is a fact. It's what it's called now.
Mr. X. Charles X Adler from now on.
That's right, Charles X Adler. Make sure to subscribe to Chuck's podcast, The Charles Adler Show, and you can catch him on Mondays, unless it's after a long weekend, Tuesdays, right here on Real Talk. We'll chat with you in 6 days, pal.
Have an energetic week.
Oh, smart man. What a wordsmith, that Charles Adler. You think that Trudeau was like intentionally poking the bear? You think he was
of course.
You think he was
fun.
sort of like smirking and giggling as he posted the photo, or do you think it was?
I mean, maybe, but in the end, if it wasn't so controversial, you're right. It's just him going to see a movie with his son. Who cares?
Yeah.
Why is this such a big deal?
This is great. I love this comment from Anna, who says, females, says Anna. I'm yelling because it's in caps. Says the litmus test for any male in your life, or any male that you're thinking about letting in your life, take them to Barbie and ask them if the movie made sense. And their answer will tell you everything.
Made a lot of sense.
That from Anna.
It was very witty,
You saw it opening weekend. You were like one of the first.
Yeah, Greta's very intelligent way of writing and getting the point across, but keeping it light and fun. But I can see how people on the right are like, the indoctrination, but I can also
people so worried
they
about
can find that in
pathetic.
anything.
I'd love to see Pierre. I mean, Chuck kind of made the subtle reference to Pierre Polyev losing the glasses, less product in there, changing them. I would love to see Pierre Polyev.
He's going Ken style.
Well, but why would? Yeah, I'd love to see Pierre Polyev go to the Barbie movie and tweet about it. Why not? I'd love to see.
Of course, he wouldn't.
Well, why? But like. Do people anyway? I would never drag politicians into this debate if they weren't dragging themselves into it anyway.
100%.
It's just the blowback was so predictable, but also just so weird.
Yeah.
Like, do these, and these are the, I've said this before many times. This is the crowd, this is the crew that's always talking about the liberal snowflakes
and
all
Hollywood
the pansies
is
and the
doing
snowflakes,
this and that.
And then they get so triggered. by a Barbie movie. So triggered. It's hilarious.
And they're all against Hollywood when, Hollywood has its problems, but it's given us magic moments and memories from our childhood until today. If we didn't have Hollywood, we wouldn't have storytelling. We wouldn't have all the things, all the movies you know and love came out of Hollywood. All the stories, all the plays, all the stuff on Broadway that was taken from Hollywood. I mean, it just seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah. Nice to see former Calgary councillor, candidate for mayor, Jeremy Farkas, in the live chat. Good morning to you, Jer, and bringing this back to the conversation about the renewables moratorium. Keep in mind, this is coming from a conservative. Farkas says the renewables moratorium is nuts. He says it's not just bad policy, but it's bad politics. He says erratic moves like this will feed into the NDP narrative of what will she do next, and they'll hurt the UCP in Calgary. We got to get Jared back on the show. I'll reach out to him. I wanted to read this email. This is from Shalaine real quick, and we'll get to our guest from the Pembina Institute. Binnu Jeyakumar is going to be joining us, director of their electricity program, in just a second. But we got this email from Shalaine over the weekend. I love this. She says, Jespo, I follow your wife, Carrie, on Instagram. You can find her at Carrie Skelton. And I saw that she went to the Barbie movie. She did, with her girls. It says it looked like they made a fun night around it, like so many are doing. She said, I went to the movie. Shalaine says, I went to the movie with my mom. Her name's Barbara. And she has, I don't know why I said it like that, but she says her name is Barbara. And she's always been the OG Barbie to me. Says, my 14-year-old daughter joined us, my 10-year-old middle son, and we pulled out all of our old Barbies. My mom's from 1966, mine from 1988, and my daughter's from 2013. How cool is that? She says it's the top movie of the summer. It's grossed over $1 billion. It's still packing theaters. Theater goers include our PM and his son, which is obviously causing its own controversy, including how Canadians are saying no thank you to that loser Piers Morgan. Shalaine says, more importantly, it has an amazing message for everybody, not just women. And I'd love if more people knew that it's not just a movie about a doll, but it also has a very thought-provoking and a glut of empowering messages. Shalaine says, I wish I could think of a perfect guest to suggest on Real Talk that could attest to and champion this movie. Says, but I'm sure your team can come up with somebody. I think it would make an interesting, all-inclusive, and relevant show. She signs off, your steadfast Patreon supporter, unwavering friend of the show, and loyal Leducian. That from Shalaine. I love it. That's great. We love hearing from you and knowing what you would love to hear on the show, a guest you would like to see on the show, topic matter you'd love for us to tackle, and you can be in touch with us anytime. These conversations are presented by Real Talk sponsors like our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and there is one message that we want to resonate and stick with you, and that is that August 10th, it's coming up this week. Thursday, August 10th is Miracle Treat Day, and that means that every single cent that they collect from Blizzard sales at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road in Sherwood Park are going to go to the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation. They have raised 7 figures for the Stollery over the years, and we can't wait to see the total this year as thousands and thousands of people show up in support of children's health resources and services. You know, the Stollery, of course, has patients from across Western Canada. It is the hub for really critical medical supports based right here out of our home city of Edmonton. You can attend one of those Dairy Queens, show up on August 10th on Thursday and grab a Blizzard or a few, or you can get in touch with them ahead of time and put in a big order. You want to buy Blizzards for everybody on the street? You want to show up at the soccer game or maybe the slow pitch game with a box of Blizzards? Perfect. Let them know ahead of time at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, and they will hook you up. So proud to partner we are with the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. If this is the time of year where you're starting to think, I mean, it's, you know, I hate to put it on your radar, but like in a month, kids are going back to school. And for a lot of adults, it makes sense that that's the time that you're going to pursue your post-secondary goals as well. Take a couple minutes today and poke around athabascau.ca. It's Canada's open university, Athabasca U is, with world-class accredited online programs and courses that offer you the flexibility. That's one of the biggest drawing factors to Athabasca U. You're not going to fall behind on your courses if you need to step away for a bit, or you want to take a family vacation, or you're feeling under the weather, or you need a mental health break. And you can also fast forward ahead if you like. And the numbers of AU alumni are really, really impressive. More than 95% of their grads say that they're satisfied with the quality of their education. More than 95%. That is an astounding number. Would recommend AU to others. And nearly 9 out of 10 say that they're working in a job related to their field of study. You don't get that with every post-secondary degree. Check out athabascau.ca today. You know, this studio that we show up to and work out of every single day is built by the team at Complete Care Restoration. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can see the job that they do. Every attention to detail, ultimate professionalism. It was a pleasure to work with them, and we're proud to partner with them. Now, nobody loves having to deal with fire damage, flood damage, mold, or asbestos, to say the least, right? Captain Obvious checking in. But if you have experienced that gut punch and you're getting set to rebuild, may we recommend a quick call to Complete Care Restoration. Your insurance policy quite likely lets you choose who does the work on your restoration project. We recommend that you choose Complete Care Restoration. And a shout out from our friends at Friesen Brothers. Number one, the first of every month, It's 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more. So you got to make sure that you make a note in your calendar to visit a Friesen Brothers near you. There's 16 of them across the province coming up on September 1st. I don't want you to miss that. But I also want to let you know about their Family Essentials Easy Family Meal Solutions. Every month, they're introducing new ones. Okay, these are simple but really interesting recipes that can be made using the products that are featured in their Family Essentials flyer. There's a ton of great summer recipes in this month's Family Essentials, from barbecue tips to salads to sips. And you can check out the full flyer available online at friesen.com. That's FRESON.com.
Had a wedding this Saturday, catered by Friesen Bros.
Oh,
Yeah,
how was it?
I didn't even know, but I showed up because they weren't wearing like Friesen Bro, chef
Right.
clothing, but I recognized the person who was setting up the buffet table, and I
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I saw you at the vegan buffet. You were the one in line." She's like, "Yeah, Friesen Bros is catering the wedding today." It was absolutely incredible.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I saw an Instagram post. They were out catering at Big Valley Jamboree as well this weekend, which
Yeah.
would obviously be a huge deal.
Which is something people might not think about, right? They're a grocery store, but they will cater your event. They'll do the full spread. It's great, yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great shout out. And you can check out, they've got catering by Friesen Brothers. Just Google it and you can find all those details. You're just trying to get us more free vegan pepperoni pizzas.
Give us the food.
I like that. Give us the food. We'll take it. All right. Like we said, we're taking sort of an across the spectrum approach to this moratorium on renewables this week. We want to hear from industry. We want to hear from people that are keeping an eye on industry, the expert eyes, that is. We'll talk to a government minister tomorrow. That's Rebecca Schultz, and we'll talk to an NDP critic coming up on Thursday. Right now, it's a pleasure to introduce you to the director of the Pembina Institute's electricity program. Binnu Jeyakumar has a ton of skills, expertise, and experience in this field, from the power industry, the government and nonprofit sectors, and a lot of experience in fossil fuels and renewable generation tech as well. She's worked as a plant and performance engineer at TransAlta's generating facilities in Alberta, in Ontario, in Mexico. She's worked with the government in Ghana as a consultant, focusing on local government effectiveness, and she currently serves on the board of Blue Green Canada. She knows what she's talking about, and she's making her Real Talk debut today. It's so nice to see your face, and thanks for making time for us on this Tuesday.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you for having me here. It's such an honor.
Well, you bet. I mean, we wanted to go to somebody that has a really clear understanding of where the renewables sector is at in Alberta, what the growth has looked like, where Alberta stacks up to other provinces, and what this government moratorium might do or maybe might not. When you heard about this 6-month moratorium, what was the first thing that crossed your mind?
To be honest, I went and looked at mandate letters. So one of the things I noticed was Minister Nodorf's mandate letter actually says affordability is a top concern for Albertans, and that the government should take proactive action to stabilize and reduce the cost to all Albertans. And the cheapest source of energy right now in Alberta is wind and solar, and this puts the brakes on that. And I wouldn't say this is just the sentiment of hippie organizations or environmental organizations. Just 2 months ago, the Market Surveillance Administrator, which is sort of the referee for our electricity market, said in their report that the increased wind and solar in Alberta is actually driving down energy prices. And Pembina's recent report, we just published something a month ago. We found that Albertans could save $600 a year if we converted to a clean grid. So one of the first reactions I had was this creates risk for Albertans in terms of affordability of energy prices at a time when that's a major concern for folks.
This is where the conversation has to go, Binnu. You know it as well as I do, right? For the average person to really care about this, people, we do care about the big picture stuff. Canada's, energy targets, or the road to net zero, or emissions our commitment to Kyoto, whatever. But at the end of the day, people care most, like, what does my utilities bill look like at the end of the month, and what does that mean, regarding whether or not my family can afford to go away for a weekend to ride the water slides. Like, that's what the average person really cares about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, this is why this is an economic issue, right? Wind and solar have a lot of other benefits, but the biggest impact for us in Alberta is the electricity prices. Maybe another thing potentially that average Albertans also care about is jobs and what does their local community look like. When we looked at this announcement, it could actually put at risk about 100 projects, which represents $25 billion of investment. And what that means locally is tens of thousands of jobs and local revenue. So, the town of Vulcan, for example, they get 45% of their municipal revenues from renewable energy projects. So these can make up a big part of a town's revenue.
Binnu, did you just say 45%?
I know, it blew my mind too. Yeah, definitely. There are towns where they're losing some revenue from oil and gas pipelines, for example, as the production drops or for some reason as price of oil is low, and they're looking to renewables as a more reliable source of income. Yeah, almost half.
When you look, or as you take us along, and we all look at neighboring provinces or across the country, so immediately, they say like BC, Yukon, Saskatchewan, and then on from there. How does Alberta's decision here stack up to or compare what they're doing nearby?
Yeah, it's a step in the other direction. It's really fascinating. Exactly. All the way from BC to Atlantic Canada, provinces are procuring more renewable energy. And it doesn't matter the ideology of the government in place. So even if you look at conservative governments in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, they all are investing in renewable energy. So this tells you this goes beyond party colors. Ontario actually recently issued the largest procurement for storage in Canada's history. So that's why it's a bit mind-boggling that Alberta would go in the different direction. Yeah. And what it tells me when I see conservative provinces investing in this too, it tells me that this is an economic case, right? Like they're doing it for jobs, they're doing it for investments, they're doing it to bring prices of electricity down.
Yeah, I mean, it drives me absolutely nuts when things like green energy or renewables become political hot potatoes, because I think that it's completely counterproductive. And for that matter, having grown up in ardent conservative circles, like you just touched on, number one, economic activity is obviously a top priority. Economic stimulus, economic opportunity, investment opportunity and attraction, et cetera, are for many people a bedrock of where they place their political beliefs. But also, I'd hate to be a conservative that was known for supporting a party that was against, on principle, where it made sense for energy to go. That's not exactly a flattering. I know we didn't bring you here to talk about political science, but I'm sure you have an opinion on this. It's not exactly a flattering look for conservatives that are looking to keep government in Alberta and gain government federally, And
I'd say it goes even beyond voters, right? Look at the verdict we got from industry over the last several days across the media coverage. It's been roundly condemned, this moratorium. They were not consulted as part of this. And I would say it's not just renewable energy developers, it's also the investors that back them, many of them international investors, and even corporations. So the likes of Maple Leaf, Amazon are actually investing in Alberta to buy renewable energy. So these are people you probably wouldn't think of in terms of electricity, but they have corporate goals and they want to get clean energy to meet their goals. And that's honestly driven more than 95% of the renewable growth in Alberta. It hasn't been driven by any citizen organization. It's by these corporations that are purchasing renewable energy.
If you're just joining us, live streaming audio on the Mixler audio app presented by California Closets, we're talking to Binnu Jeyakumar from the Pembina Institute, where she's the director of the electricity program. So we'll hear from people that'll say, hang on a second, though, you're focusing too much on the economics of this. That's not what this is about, right? The moratorium, says the government, says Minister Neudorf, Minister of Affordability and Utilities, that it's in response to rural concerns about development on agricultural land. They're concerned about the effect on scenery, which I think is kind of comical, but I digress. I'll let you answer. Reclamation security, right? They're worried about what happens if the solar panels go belly up and if the wind turbines stop working and who's going to pay to get rid of them and what they'll do with that physical waste. And then system reliability as well. How would you answer those, or at least how would you approach answering those objections? Scenery and protecting, valuable topsoil.
Yeah, really valid questions, Ryan. And I've heard these questions in conversations too. So interestingly, Pembina actually published a guide for landowners on how to approach renewable energy development back in 2010. So none of these are new issues. We've been talking about these for over 2 decades now. And I'd say overall, there are some systems in place to take into account some of the concerns that people have. Well, that was quick.
And, we got a good team, friend.
And at the same time, there definitely is a bit of room for improvement. So let me tackle a couple of the things you brought up one by one. One is the value of agricultural land, and that's a very valid concern. But this is where I think part of these concerns are actually coming from Albertans' experience with oil and gas wells. And it's good that they are being cautious about this, but renewable energy is different. So while oil and gas wells can be built without the permission of the landowner, for renewable energy development to happen, they need permission from the landowner. So all of this development that we're talking about right now is happening on private land, and all of it has explicit agreements with the landowner. And I would trust our farmers to evaluate what the value of their agricultural land is. They know it. They've been working it forever. They know the economics and the potential of that land. So I would trust that they can enter into agreements. There are ways we can improve their capacity to do that, have more transparency, but fundamentally it's up to the landowner to do it. And this is power that they don't really have with oil and gas wells. The other piece on reclamation, again, I think it's a issue transferred over from oil and gas wells, where once you run out of oil in the well, you don't have a source of revenue. And so this is why we see a lot of orphan well problems. But you don't run out of sun or wind anytime soon. I think the sun's going to be around for billions of years. So the issue is very different for renewable energy, right? At the end of life of this equipment, what's most likely going to happen is another developer will come and they'll repower this site with better equipment that'll actually generate energy even more effectively a few decades from now. So, and they'll even repurpose the steel that's there. It's valuable steel. They're not going to let it go to waste. So in that sense, the reclamation issue is a bit different. And I'd say for us, the magnitude is also different, right? We've got $260 billion of liability of oil and gas wells that we need. I would say we should tackle first before doing this. But I would also say let's continue doing best practices and improve things with how we do renewable energy development. Pembina has always tried to do responsible energy development, regardless of what source of energy it is. The last bit I also wanted to say on agricultural land, I think you're right, Ryan. A lot of this conversation is happening in rural Alberta. But I've seen with my own eyes combines coming right up to the base of a wind turbine and working the land around that. Most wind farms take up less than 5% of the land that they lease. So I think people don't understand also the impact on the land is very different than what it is for oil and gas development.
Yeah. I can't stop. I don't know. Maybe it makes me a prick, but I just can't stop laughing at the concern around impact on scenery. Like that's just not, it's not a thing. Anyway, I digress. I just think the average person would smirk at that, and I think that they should smirk at that because we seem to care about some things more than we care about others when it comes to impact on scenery, but I digress. You've made an interesting argument that there is an Alberta advantage here. There's an Alberta advantage when it comes to renewables. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, we have amazing wind and solar in Alberta right now. That's why it's been so cheap for us to develop it here. Alberta is right now the leader of clean energy development in Canada, and that's what you're seeing there. Over 3/4 of the capacity of renewables that's been built recently was built in Alberta. And the other thing, if you extrapolate this, is it actually creates an export opportunity for us. This is not the case for every province, but if we actually decarbonize our grid, Alberta, which right now is a net importer of electricity from other provinces and states, can actually become a net exporter of electricity. And this can only benefit us, right? So we don't have to just export barrels of oil. We can actually also export electrons. And that can be a great source of revenue and economic development for us.
We're going to be talking, as mentioned, to Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz tomorrow on the show. And we've been talking to her team about the interview for a while. As a matter of fact, the interview was confirmed before this moratorium was announced because we wanted to talk to her about her recent conversation with the federal Environment Minister, with Stephen Guilbeault. And we'll get into that. When the Premier was last on this show, Danielle Smith talked about how, there's concern around this plan to get Alberta to a net zero grid by 2035. The Premier's not convinced that can happen. She said as much in the interview. People can check it out in our archives, and we'll play a portion of that on tomorrow's show. Do you believe that Alberta can achieve a net zero grid in the next 12 years?
I certainly think so. That's what wakes me up every morning. And I have a story to share about that, Ryan. Alberta has actually shown that we can do this. And this is the story of Alberta's coal phase out. So back in 2012, the Harper government actually introduced the coal phase out regulation federally. Again, there was consternation around it, similar to what we're seeing right now. And that regulation would have actually seen Alberta close down its last coal plant in 2061. Fast forward to about 2015, and the province starts talking around multiple parties start talking about a coal phase out. Again, you start hearing words like unachievable. And this was only a short while ago, around 2015 through 2017. And then looking at it today, we know we're going to be phasing out coal before the end of next year. And that's going to be about 6 years in advance of the 2030 coal phase out mandate. So that shows that Alberta can actually do this. And if you look a little bit deeper into how that happened, it was a combination of good policy and Alberta's industry's innovation. So the federal government had a regulation to phase out coal. They updated the Harper regulations in 2017. And then the province set a clear plan on how it was going to phase out coal. It consulted with industry and communities and several stakeholders to create a plan for that. And then we have a free market in Alberta that allows industry to innovate regardless of extreme planning by the government. So what we saw was all the major generators of coal power in Alberta took different routes to decarbonizing. So some focused on betting big on wind and battery storage. Others invested in carbon capture. In fact, the only new carbon capture projects that we have that are very likely to get built are actually happening in the electricity sector. And that's, I think, a byproduct of something that's happening with the coal phase out. And then there's another company that's looking at blending hydrogen with gas in their power plants. So, I think it's an excellent story of how Alberta's industry has responded with innovation when it got good direction in terms of policy and planning from the government.
I'm hoping that you can use this platform to speak to some of the cynics around, and quite frankly, to help people like me better understand the impetus for a net zero grid, because I think that people, and it's just sort of like how the general public operates, like whether or not we're litigating the prime minister going to the Barbie movie with his son, or whether we're talking about the road to a net zero grid. A lot of people, including me, have a bit of a pedestrian level understanding of the issues. And I see it when people comment on, for example, our conversation with Minister Guilbeault a few weeks ago, where they believe that this is just the liberal lefty move toward, unachievable or unattainable or damaging environmental targets, Canada doing more than it should have to do, considering that China and India and other big emitters are doing, crap all on the file. That's their perception of it. That's their understanding of it. What is the argument for a net zero grid that could resonate with critics in Alberta? What would you say to the cynics? Where would you hit them on the effective points that you think might change their mind?
Good challenge, Ryan. My goal is to make electricity as sexy as the Barbie movie.
Yeah.
I want to, yeah.
Have you seen it, by the way?
No, not yet.
Yeah, okay.
I'm working on this moratorium work, right?
Yeah, that's right.
No, I hope to. But the net zero, I just want to clarify a bit. What do we mean by net zero grid? I think I've heard this in some remarks over media recently also, where people think it's 100% renewables. It's most definitely not. That's the number one thing a net zero grid is not, is a 100% renewable grid. A net zero grid means that we have very little emissions on the grid, and any emissions that we do have, we negate it through carbon removals or other technologies. What that means for Alberta is that we can still absolutely have gas generation on the grid, but it'll require us to be more innovative on our gas generation. We should try and attach carbon capture to it, or hydrogen, both of which are, I think, issues of interest to the current government. But with those innovative technologies, which we know companies are already doing, gas can play a really important role in a net zero grid. So I want to just address that concern first. And then what you're saying around why we should do this, how is this possible? The thing you mentioned around, like, is this a burden that we're just doing as Canada? I just want to address that to start with. So right now, all the G7 countries have committed to cleaning their power grid by 2035. Even if you didn't care about the rest of the world, just our neighbors to the south, who we trade a lot with and share so much with around economy and culture, they've committed to a clean grid by 2035. In fact, they beat us on regulation in May of this year, so a couple of months ago, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, released their version of a clean electricity regulation to try to get their grid to a clean grid by 2035. So these folks are already moving. We know the technical issues are solvable. If you look at other jurisdictions, so maybe just to give people a picture of where we're at, right now, renewables provide about 16% of the power in Alberta, the energy, which is very low. We've got jurisdictions that have 40 to 50% or even more penetration. And those folks are figuring out how to run a grid reliably with that level of penetration.
In Canada, Binnu?
Good question. Not with wind and solar,
okay.
Ryan. So I'm talking about jurisdictions. So this is again across the continent in UK. For example, their grid operator has a mandate to actually figure out how to run their grid without gas, without relying on gas by 2025, 2 years from now. So we can learn from them. Down south to our neighbors to the south, Texas has a lot of wind penetration, obviously California, but there's a ton of states also that have way higher penetration than Alberta, and they're already working on these reliability issues that people are bringing up. So for us, it's a way down the road, but good for us to try and figure that out right now. But all I'm saying is we have a lot of folks and peers that we can learn from. And then maybe succinctly on why Alberta specifically can do it. I think there's a bit of irony here, what's happening in the current conversation, right? We're saying on one hand, we're really afraid Alberta can't achieve a net zero grid, but on the other hand, renewable energy development is happening too quickly for us. So I think that juxtaposition in itself tells you that Alberta at its core has the potential to decarbonize its grid really fast. The last bit of evidence I would say on this is where I'm very proud that Pembina has been wrong. So I looked at our last couple of reports. So today, Pembina has published 3 reports on decarbonizing Alberta's grid, and the very first one was published over a decade ago. And we have exceeded the greenest, deep green scenarios that Pembina said that even Pembina thought was too ambitious. Alberta has already exceeded those scenarios. So Alberta's performance on decarbonizing its grid, even to date, has exceeded everybody's expectations. And this conversation we're having today is a bit of a testament to that.
Yeah, I was blown away. And again, we'll let people know they can check out pembina.org if they want to read more and kind of like really sink their teeth into the work that you and your team are doing. But I was blown away based on your information to learn that I didn't know that, to be honest, that Alberta was not just becoming, but maybe already kind of sort of the renewable energy capital of Canada. Like more than 3/4 of wind and solar development built in Canada last year, more than 75% was in Alberta. I think that would be a surprise to like 99% of Albertans, to be honest with you.
Yeah, great percentages there, right? Absolutely. I think there's no kind of sort of on this. Yeah, like as that graph shows, it's we are definitely, without any debate, the leader of renewable energy development in Canada.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just it's,
I mean, so this is where we see interesting things. Like there are companies like Maple Leaf Foods that they're headquartered in Ontario, but they have operations and they're purchasing renewables in Alberta. We've got Amazon, right? Like it could have gone to any province and it's moving into Alberta. And one of the top 3 reasons they stated for moving into Alberta was that because we had the renewable energy potential and a market where they could procure that renewable energy.
So, I mean, can you imagine a world, or you imagine a scenario where the bean counters at Amazon move here for, I'm sure, a myriad of reasons, or at least a few attractive ones. But if this, as you described, is one of them, and then see this moratorium imposed, I mean, all it would take is one big corporate player. I mean, the biggest, maybe aside from Apple, is Amazon. To pull out. They'll move. I mean, big corporations will move jurisdictions all the time. They don't care. They have no loyalty. They're going to do what's best for their bottom line. They're going to do what's best for their own reputation. They're going to do what's best for their own shareholders. You can envision a scenario where a move like this to appease some rural voters, or whatever the case may be, could really blow up in the government's face. That could become a real significant political problem.
Yeah, I think I know we're always worried about sometimes climate policies driving investments away. This is a really good example of where an anti-climate policy could actually drive investments away. But I don't want to be all doom and gloom about this too, Ryan, right? Like there are some real issues like we talked about around the concerns from rural Alberta. And I think there are practical ways that we need to address them. We just don't need a moratorium to do that. And we need to also be aware of the current processes and tools we already have available to address that, right? And what we need, rather than sending uncertainty into the market with a moratorium, we actually need to have long-term policies that send certainty signals into the market. And I think a really good example of this is what the federal government is doing. So in some ways, it is a bit of a good contrast with this. But I actually think Alberta can come on top with this. It's the clean electricity regulation. So like I said, the US EPA announced its regulations 2 months ago. Canada is expected to announce its draft clean electricity regulations anytime soon now. And what that would do is it would provide clarity for folks across the country, including Alberta, on what emission intensity, so how much carbon they can generate for every unit of energy that they produce, what emission intensity limits it will exist for them in 2035. So it creates a bit of a runway for people to plan, for investors to figure out how they're going to meet that. And the other neat thing about this regulation is, just from the conversations we've had, they've had a year of consultations actually with industry, with provincial governments, with stakeholders, experts. And what we've seen in that is Canada is going towards a technology neutral approach, unlike the US. And so this will actually allow for innovation. And similar, to how I was saying in Alberta, we're starting to see companies invest in CCUS and hydrogen. So a clean electricity regulation like the one the feds are designing will actually incentivize in Alberta that type of innovation. But it also gives certainty. It gives certainty to industry so they can figure out technologies to invest in. It gives certainty to investors so they know where to invest. It also gives certainty to communities so they can plan for this. One of the biggest challenges for cleaning the grid is actually labor shortages that we're seeing right now. So we need to plan for training of skilled workers to work on those wind farms and solar panels. And all of that needs time for planning. So yeah, having this sort of a longer term regulations allows us to do that type of planning.
Binnu, you've thrown a bullseye today on the assignment, which was to kind of take your expertise and pardon the phrase, to dumb it down so the rest of us can understand it as well. I'm on a fact-finding mission this week because this is an area where I've got to scale up my learning. Which leads me to my final question. It is quite possible that I have missed a point or missed a question on this because I don't have the depth of understanding that you do. I'd hate for the interview to end and you to say to yourself, I wish he would have asked me about this. Is there anything, I mean, I'm sure you give me the impression we could talk about this for 10 hours, but is there something major? Is there a significant storyline or angle on this that you think is really important for people to understand or think about that we've not yet tackled?
Ryan, can I just make 2 points on that?
Please
Thank
do.
you for giving me that space. We should definitely go for beers, by the way.
Oh, done.
Talk about this forever. Yeah. You're also asking great questions from really good angles. I think the first thing I want to say is what needs to happen next, right? So, I mean, this sort of announcement, unfortunately, creates a lot of uncertainty, and you've heard a lot about that from industry already. I think productively looking at what can we do next is, one thing we can do is cancel the announcement of the moratorium. And then we can look productively at how to address those real concerns from rural communities and municipalities in particular, and walk through, do a better job of education of regulations that do exist, identify gaps, work with stakeholders, and improve processes. That is a long-term thing that we need to do, but that it'll help Alberta to do that. Like, have a made in Alberta plan for decarbonizing the grid. I think that would be my main takeaway. Let's create a plan that works for Alberta, that keeps it pace with our neighbors to the south, but delivers it in a way that Alberta can, that works for Alberta. You know, invest in infrastructure that we need to, invest in connections with other provinces and the states. So that's the number one thing, is let's have a made in Alberta plan. The other thing I want to say is a vote of confidence to on the Alberta people. There are so many smart folks in our province, Ryan, that are working on this. Did you know this Alberta system operator was the first system operator in all of Canada to do a in-depth analysis on how to get to a net zero grid? You know, and it's more comprehensive than anyone has done to date. Like I mentioned, you know, our companies are already innovating on CCUS, on hydrogen, on battery storage. We have the largest solar farm in Canada. So we've got companies innovating. We've got municipalities that are working with renewable energy developers to make sure that they have securities for reclamation, to make sure they get really good deals on hockey rinks or gravel roads that need to be built, or what's that called? High-speed internet for their communities. You know, so like all of this innovation is happening in Alberta, and I think we need to all work together to move forward on this. And I really trust the brain power, the innovation, the roll up the sleeves attitude we have in Alberta to make this happen.
This has been a fabulous conversation, and you've given us lots to work with as we continue it over the next couple of days with those that are working in policy and obviously working in governance. Want to thank you sincerely. We've been talking to Binnu Jeyakumar, director of the Pembina Institute's electricity program. You can learn more about what she and her team are doing again by checking out pembina.org. And Binnu, just so you know, the beer is always cold at the Real Talk studio, and it is always happy hour, so the door is wide open.
Amazing. Count me in. Thank you so much.
Sounds good, and thank you for your time. We kept Binnu a little bit longer than we asked her to stay for, but I wasn't about to stand in the way of that. That was like
amazing.
That was like Energy 101 right there, so I appreciate that.
With all the hullabaloo in Alberta, and then you see the numbers, and we're the ones leading the charge.
I had no idea. That's something that Alberta should be really proud of.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, 100%. And we always talk about Alberta as Canada's energy capital. Like oil and gas capital, yes, of course. And don't ever be ashamed of that, and don't ever apologize for that, but trends change. Industry moves. Technology improves.
And it's great to see. We should be leading the charge.
Yeah.
So great.
Great comment here from Ken in the live chat. Ken says, remind me, when did we ever issue moratoriums on new oil and gas wells? Well, the UCP government reworked the inadequate LMR rules, talking about liability management. He says we didn't, and it still doesn't fix the problem. I also noticed, and I'm sitting there kind of scoffing at the concerns around scenery. I guess that I don't mean to shrug those off. I mean, if somebody does have a problem with it, that's perfectly okay that they have a problem with it. I saw Alyssa say that wind turbines are an eyesore and they've got to improve the technology there, and so wind turbines aren't so prominent. Meantime, Curtis says, well, I kind of like the look of wind turbines. They're kind of cool. And then we had Jeremy saying, well, things like aesthetic are subjective, which is obviously a very fair point. I don't think that anybody's putting, non-functioning wind turbines up just because they love the look of them. But Jeremy says, it's maybe a little bit hypocritical for us to find oil derricks beautiful and wind turbines disgraceful.
Yeah.
We were passing through Fernie this weekend, and they've got a really neat installation in Fernie. They have a wood. I wish I would have taken a picture of it. An oil derrick, like an oil well, a wood oil derrick that was rebuilt in the 1960s. It was originally, I think it was installed in like the late 1800s, and super cool. I mean, I think that it's, the oil derrick has become an iconic symbol in the province of Alberta because it represents industry and because it's represented, quite frankly, prosperity. In an industry that a lot of people are proud to be a part of. And, you look at the Edmonton Oilers used to skate out under the oil derrick for many years.
Yeah.
One of my favorite distillers in the province. Their bottles are shaped like an oil derrick. It is an iconic image. But yeah, I'm not sure that I'm
Here's that Fernie derrick.
Oh, thanks. Nice call. Yeah. Isn't that neat? It's like just a really neat piece of history, and it helps people understand. You kind of pass through, you get this like lesson in BC on Canadian energy history, right? You drive through Sparwood, you see that huge truck.
First time I went to Fernie, I took a bus from Ontario to Fernie.
Oh, wow.
And you just, as you're coming into, just the drive in the mountains is just incredible.
Yeah, it's all on fire right now too, by the way,
it's
which
horrible.
sucks, but or at least by Sparwood, but crews are doing an amazing job out there. But yeah, you see, like you come through Crow's Nest Pass. I'm always, this has nothing to do with anything, but I've driven through Frank and seen the Frank slide like 100 times in my life, and I still every single time just go, wow. I mean, it's just, have you ever seen the Frank slide? It's like it's the wildest.
Yeah, I have.
It's the wildest thing. My buddy's commenting. He goes, isn't it crazy that like an entire jurisdiction's tourism is based on the fact that like a ton of people died in a minute and a half as Turtle Mountain came sliding down? But you drive through there and it's just like blows my mind. But the the coal mining and I was kind of chatting with a buddy who's not necessarily as politically engaged as most, or as some of us anyway. And I was just talking to him about this part of the province and Crow's Nest Pass and the coal mining in the eastern slopes, and the NDP's plan to put in a provincial park there, and then the UCP dialing that back, and how contentious and politically charged the conversation has been on industry in that part of the province.
Yeah.
And as you head west, you see a lot of the proud history of coal mining. You see a lot on like we said, the oil derrick there near Fernie. You head east, and if you're heading towards Lethbridge, you're going to see nothing but wind turbines dotting the landscape, and it's kind of an interesting dichotomy, you know?
It totally is.
Kind of cool. You can let us know what you think about this conversation. Again, Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz joining us on Wednesday's show, and Najwan El-Junaid, the NDP MLA out of Calgary. She's the energy, or the shadow minister, they call her, for energy, and she'll be joining us on Thursday's show. This conversation is presented by Real Talk sponsors like our friends at Eden Landscaping. Got home from the August long weekend, came out, took a peek at the backyard last night. You know that we're having our space reinvented by this talented team, and it honestly knocked my socks off. I can't wait to show you the finished product, the reveal. You can follow my wife, Carrie Skelton, and myself, Ryan Jesperson, on Instagram if you want to see our stories, our Instagram stories, the updates on this project. What's really blowing my mind is seeing the design manifest itself into real life as they bring our outdoor space to life. Mike and his team on the design front have absolutely nailed it. We said it needs to be attractive, but it needs to be functional. It needs to be a yard where we can host cocktail parties and where dogs can play. And that's not always an easy balance to strike, but they've done exactly that. You can Get in touch with the Eden Landscaping team and get your design process started today by visiting landscapeedmonton.ca. Wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Local Environmental Services. We're calling all decision makers, whether it's a big or a small business that you're representing, or maybe you're making a call on behalf of municipalities. Chances are you're paying attention to your bottom line, to state the obvious. Now, some people may think, well, local environmental service, this is just garbage, right? Garbage and recycling. It's not just that to them. They believe that communities deserve better when it comes to service, when it comes to prices, and when it comes to support for local causes. You can view their services online today at localenvironmental.ca. The quote is free, and we can all but guarantee you're going to save money when you take your business to Local Environmental Services. We're talking a lot about the energy industry, obviously, and you know as well as I do that oil sands operations contribute significant carbon emissions in Canada. And that's why the 6 largest companies in the sector are working together and with governments to take strides on the path to net zero from their operations. Part of that plan includes developing a proposed carbon capture and storage network by 2030. It's going to be one of the world's largest. You can learn more about the clear strides to net zero by visiting pathwaysalliance.ca. And if all this talk about mining and wind and solar and natural gas and the oil sands has caught your attention because you're a professional engineer that's working in the space or that wants to be working in the space, we recommend taking 2 minutes today to check out apexautomation.ca. This is one of the fastest growing automation firms in the country. And just late last year, they celebrated their 10th anniversary. They're marking that occasion by putting out the call to engineers, electrical, instrumentation, computer science, process, mechanical engineers. They're hiring right now. If you'd like to do work in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, or even down in the Lone Star State of Texas, whether you're a recent graduate from an engineering school or one with a wealth of experience, if you'd like to work for a team that puts people ahead of profits, that is committed to helping you achieve your professional potential, check out the careers link at apexautomation.ca. You got the photo of Fernie up there. The welcome to Fernie. Yeah,
Man, I love Fernie. I lived there for 6 months back in 2000.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I used to, back in my days when I wanted to be a professional snowboarder, but only ever made it to like just below amateur. But I hung out with some of the Burton boys, but I went straight to Fernie out of high school for about 6 months. I lived there for basically the whole snowboard season, and then a few months after, I wanted to move there. It's such, and I know it's changed now. Back then, the ski resort was building up, and I know now it's a much different place. But back then, it was like a little bubble. It was like a little community that was just so, I don't know, like back in time or something. It felt like you were like disconnected from the rest of the world. It's just an absolutely beautiful place. I'm so glad you got to go there and hang out there this weekend.
Yeah, man. And the snow that they get in the winter is like almost second to none.
Incredible.
In Canada. Like they just get dumped on in Fernie. And then if anybody hasn't ridden, I don't know why I'm talking about this now, because now I'm going to obsess over this for the whole entire week. But it's the Fernie Alpine Resort is just a series of bowls.
Incredible.
And I don't know if you have a favorite, but I love Cedar Bowl.
Yeah.
Is one of the best. I think Lizard Bowl is another names of one of those. So they even drove past the Fernie Hospital, where I received excellent care for a concussion back in the day.
Oh, I thought this weekend. I'm like,
no,
what
not
happened?
this weekend. Yeah, no, not this weekend. But I was. This was back in my freestyle skiing days before I converted to snowboarding.
Ooh.
And so the freestyle skiers will know. Like back in the day, I don't know if they still pull this trick. The sport has changed so much. There were no twin tip skis and stuff like that back in the day. But I used to compete mogul skiing.
Wow.
And there's the double daffy. And I can tell you with experience that if you're attempting a double daffy, but you don't get through the second one and you land in the daffy position, it can lead to quite a yard sale. And that was one. These were pre-helmets too. Nobody wore helmets back in the day. So I would say I would never forget my time in the Fernie Hospital, but I forget almost every single second of it.
The double daffy, is this where like you're kind of running
Yeah,
in
you
the
kind
sky,
of like
you're
run,
going,
you like stretch.
"Oh!"
Yeah, exactly. You stretch your ski. How are you pulling these photos so quick, man? Believe it or not, I did not let you know we were going to be talking about double daffies today. But yeah, it's
And
kind
you
of.
go back and
I think
forth,
it's kind
yeah.
of like an old school. I don't think that the kids are doing double daffies anymore. Maybe for good reason. All this talk about solar, gosh, it's obviously one of our most incredible supporters of this show is the team at Kuby Renewable Energy, right? And you can get your free solar quote today by visiting kubyenergy.ca. Well, the first episode of every week, usually it's a Monday. Today it's a Tuesday. Kuby gives us a reason to just focus on the positive and to take a look at somebody or maybe a group or maybe an incident, an event that's filling people with hope and optimism. And it's a tradition we call positive reflections. Now, this one today is the story of a guy that took a pretty lousy situation himself and turned it into a really remarkable outcome. I want you to meet Rob Kenney. When Rob Kenney was 14 years old, his dad left. His dad walked out. And, it left him wanting more. It left him feeling a deficit on the dad front, not just on the companionship, not just on the relationship side, but on the advice side as well. He calls it dadvice. And so when Rob Kenney became an adult, he decided to start a YouTube channel called Dad, How Do I? And if you check it out online, go to YouTube and just search Dad, How Do I? You'll find that, for his 4.5 million subscribers, Rob Kenney puts out videos like, Dad, how do I be grateful? Dad, how do I put air in my tires? Dad, how do I make nachos? Dad, how do I wear a suit? He's got lessons on how to apply deodorant and cologne, on how to use a crowbar, on how to plant a tree, on how to make sweet cornbread, even how to make a simple budget, money management. It's been such a huge response to his YouTube channel that just last year, Rob Kenney produced and published a book, Dad, How Do I? Practical Dadvice for Everyday Tasks and Successful Living. It's his response, taking a lousy situation and turning it into a positive for literally millions of kids, teens, and adults in the same boat. I absolutely love it. When I heard about his YouTube channel, I spent an hour watching his videos, and I encourage you, regardless of your situation, to do the same thing. It's Rob Kenney, the man behind Dad, How Do I? In the spotlight on today's Positive Reflections, presented by our good friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. Speaking of positive reflections, wanted to let you know that if you're a regular audience member to this show, you're probably going to remember Mr. T. You remember Mr. T and the principal at his school, New Mernham School, Daniel Erickson, that joined us on the show a while back after he was recognized with the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence? Well, their programs have continued to rack up further awards and achieve international acclaim. And so, as a first, coming up on this Friday's Real Talk, we're building our roundtable around the success stories at New Mernham School. Mr. T is going to join us. Principal Erickson's going to join us, along with one of their students that's helping turn a building in their town into a net zero enterprise. That's coming up in our Real Talk Roundtable this Friday. We hope you'll join us. Between now and then, make it a great week. And thanks for being such a great friend of Real Talk.
Real Talk.